From the land of conjurers flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the Witching Hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever or whenever you are listening to this program. I am China the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing, Jenny?
I'm getting a little bit less discombobulated.
All right. Well, I mean,
That's
it's been,
good thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just the state of things nowadays. Discombobulated sounds sounds like it's par for the course right now. But we're glad.
I was with my my aunt over the weekend, somewhere on the internet, someplace. It looked like it was in a foreign airport or something. It said recombobulation area. That's what I need right now. I need to be in the recombobulation area.
Is that what we do after stream? Instead of calling it a D stream, we just call it a recombobulation.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that.
All right. So welcome in, everyone. It's good to see everyone here in chat. Welcome in, welcome in. So happy to see you all once again. I hadn't mentioned anything about this. I don't even know if Medium Jenny knows this, and I don't think that Mark does either, but tonight is our 60th episode. So not too bad. Not too bad. We started off doing this like once a month for like the first year.
Yeah.
So, 60 episodes, and I guess we'll be moving forward towards the 3 digits here over the next year, I imagine. So,
and this
60.
Is, how many appearances is this for Mark? 4?
4.
Yeah.
4.
We said we were going to make you like a tinfoil hat or something that said the Witching Hours on it.
You know, I heard the podcast when you said it. I was very tempted to put on a tinfoil hat when I got here.
We got to figure out something. What we talked about before, I grew up kind of a big fan of Saturday Night Live, from the 80s through the 90s, and we still watch it today, even though, at least bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
And, they had the 5 Timers Club.
Yeah.
So, we're one away. So we'll see. We might have to come up with something as we start getting there. So cheers.
He's got his Witching Hours mug. We can't afford the red velvet jacket or whatever, but we can make you a tinfoil hat.
The smoking jacket would be kind of cool, but anyway, we'll figure it out. All right. So we ready to get into some news, Jenny?
Yes. What you got for us this week? There's been some weird stuff.
Well, there has been some weird stuff. The news is, the news. And as I said before, we try to keep it weird here, but sometimes we have to mention some things. So today, President Biden comes out to condemn violence and arrests at college campuses. Top 2,000 police removed barricades and began dismantling a fortified encampment for pro-Palestinian demonstrators early Thursday at UCLA after hundreds of protesters defied orders to leave. Tent encampments of protesters calling on universities to stop doing business with Israel or companies they say support the war in Gaza have spread across campuses nationwide in a student movement unlike any other this century. And that's all I want to kind of say. We try to stay out of politics, but this thing is going on.
It's a lot of stuff happening right now.
Yeah. I think no matter what side in all this stuff that people come down on, it's a world event that's taking place. And I don't think we've seen protests in this large a number probably since, I don't know, you might have to go back to the college campuses in the 1960s to see something like that. So we'll see how this turns out.
Yeah.
Second story tonight is a second Boeing whistleblower dies after raising concerns about the 737 MAX. I had not heard about this story until I was looking for news articles.
Whenever whistleblowers die, it's always a little concerning.
A second Boeing whistleblower has died after a sudden illness. Joshua Dean, a former quality auditor at Spirit AeroSystems, went public with claims that the company's leadership ignored manufacturing defects in Boeing's 737 MAX Spirit Aerosystems is a Boeing supplier. Dean, 45, had an active lifestyle and was believed to be in good health prior to his sudden death on Tuesday. Following the onset of a fast-moving infection, he was stricken with influenza B and MRSA and developed pneumonia, according to a Fox News. He spent 2 weeks in critical condition before he died on Tuesday. Our thoughts are with Josh Dean's family. The sudden loss is stunning news here, and for his loved ones, the Spirit spokesperson said, Dean is the second whistleblower to die this year after coming forward about safety issues in the aviation manufacturing industry.
Doesn't look good.
Yeah, Boeing whistleblower John Barnett, 62, was found dead in his truck in a hotel parking lot in South Carolina in March. So,
goodness.
That's interesting. I don't know if there's, if there's more smoke there, if it happens to be some kind of coincidence, but something to keep our eyes on for sure. I was able to show. We talked about this.
Do you have a nice story for
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We do. I'll get something. I was showing Jenny a video yesterday, and this news article goes along with that. We have talked about this on the Weird News before, so this is kind of an update on that. An Earth-like planet, tantalizing proof of life on this exoplanet has scientists in shock. So scientists have spotted a gas only produced by life on distant planet that could ultimately prove that Earth is not the only planet in this vast cosmos to host life. On Friday, NASA's James Webb Telescope went on a mission towards K2-18b to probe the most tantalizing hints of alien life ever. The gas dimethyl sulfide found on K2-18b has only one source on our planet. So the gas dimethyl sulfide on our planet only has one source, and that's living beings. NASA explained that it mainly comes from phytoplankton in marine environments. The doctor doing the study here, and I don't want to butcher his name, Niku Madhusudan, an astrophysicist from the University of Cambridge leading the study, recalled when his analysis showed a possible hint of DMS in the planet's atmosphere last year. He told the Times it was a real shock. I had sleepless nights for weeks. That week, I didn't even muster the courage to break the news to his team. While the researchers could say with over 50% confidence that the dimethyl sulfide was present based on the data sent by the James Webb Telescope last year, they said it was far from conclusive. But he's being super cautious, as any previous claim of discovery of alien life like fossils and Martian meteorites and phosphine gas and Venetian clouds have been debunked or challenged by studies offering more plausible explanations. Last year, NASA revealed there was the presence of carbon-bearing molecules, including methane and carbon dioxide on that planet. And these findings come after the previous discovery that the planet could be a Hycean exoplanet, meaning it has the potential to possess a hydrogen-rich atmosphere and an ocean-covered surface.
Cool.
So kind of, I guess, what you would expect to find.
If it has an ocean and it's got living things in it.
Yeah, and the video I was watching, it said something about the fact that there's like methane, certain gases that are present, but then also the fact that they're not detecting other certain gases lead them to believe that it probably is life. The guy who's leading this information said that he would give it a 50% chance. 50-50 shot that they've found some kind of life on this.
So we're sending the James Webb
planet.
Telescope over there to get more information.
Yeah, so they want to examine it more with the James Webb. The planet itself was discovered in 2015, and it's in the constellation Leo. The Leo constellation. Its mass is 8.6 times that of the Earth, and the radius is 2.6 times that of Earth. So it'd be I guess that would qualify as a super Earth. That's
a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was another story I didn't get quite written up, but it was pretty interesting. Scientists have, in captivity, they have an orangutan. The orangutan became injured. He had like a piece of flesh kind of missing off, like the cheek area. He got hurt.
Yeah.
So yeah, at first, an orangutan was seen treating his wound with a medicinal plant. So it's a kind of plant that is not that orangutans do not eat. But after they discovered the injury and they were kind of monitoring him more closely, they realized that he began going over to that plant and he would chew up the leaves and make a paste out of it and rub it on his wound.
That's amazing.
I'll put a picture up in Discord for anybody who wants to look. They have a picture here, but it never became infected and it healed. So this is the first time
when
that
I was a kid and I went to the zoo, the orangutans were always my favorite.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that's we have those discussions on this show about life and sentience and and spirits and what could possibly have spirits. So there we go.
It's pretty neat.
Yep. And that was yeah, that was the news.
CMC Airboss said that he used to work for Boeing and he had a coworker that died from MRSA 10 years ago. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I don't really know what to think about the story because I know about the reports and I know that there was stuff going on with the Max and all that, but I don't know. This is the first time I've kind of seen of people dying that are whistleblowers. So I guess we can see where that goes, or maybe even possibly have somebody come on and talk about it. I don't know. We'll see how that happens. But there we go. That was the news. Everybody already knows, but tonight we got a great show for you. We are going to have Mark Hunter Brooks back on the show. Of course, the author of Earth's Hidden Reality. And we talked about it before. We've had him on here 3 other times. Tonight's number 4. We're looking forward to all kinds of discussions tonight. He typically writes and speaks about the mechanics of the non-physical world, helping make what many consider to be the mystical easier to understand, manage multiple IT business projects. And we welcome back to the show, Mark Hunter Brooks. Thanks for coming back on, Mark.
Well, thank you, Frosty. Thank you, Jenny Lee. And I'm happy to be here and glad to be back and glad to be back with the community as well.
Yeah, they're all excited to see you. Shouting Mark from the rooftops.
Oh, boy. But you're a great group. I was telling one of your community members, whose name I won't mention, but I enjoy seeing their funny haha memes every day whenever I log on.
Yes, we have a great group of weirdos.
That's cool.
So what's been new with you?
Oh, boy. I don't really know how to describe it. I've been reading more and researching more, but I've been doing more on the experiential side of metaphysics and the paranormal than on the intellectual side.
So what kind of experiments have you been doing?
Oh, not experiments. It's just doing some, oh gosh, what can I say? There's so much to say, and I hope I can do it in an organized fashion.
That's okay.
I wanted to read a quote and get your responses from the chat, but it's something I came up with. I'm trying it out to see what people think. Is occultism and mysticism are respective forms of science and theology that recognize the existence of non-physical dimensions. And what I mean by that is that what people consider abnormal could align with the laws of physics. And that's going back to my book. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of taken on a new meaning when I've been reading more and more about everything in the universe vibrates. And we can have sounds of planets or of black holes or of different things in the universe. The Earth's ionosphere vibrates at the Schumann resonance of 7.83 hertz and its harmonics. Our heart can be measured by EKG, our brain by EEGs that puts out waves. Mm-hmm. And what was intriguing to me is when you talk about people who have the spiritual ability of clairvoyance, that could be the reading of your thoughts, but you say, how do they transmit them? And it could be just like with an AM or FM radio, they modulate it to where you have a carrier wave at your unique frequency, and every individual on the planet has a unique frequency for their body. But your thoughts ride those waves, and people can pick them up from miles away if they're sufficiently sensitive. I mean, a long distances. It isn't like the 8 or 15 feet or 20 or 30 feet that you may think if it's around your body. But that's been intriguing to me. And then also I've been reading books that are telling me not only do you need to control your emotions and your ego, and you hear a lot about that. And I wrote in too that you need to develop unconditional or selfless love for other people, perseverance and moral courage. But things I've been reading recently is say that you have to even control your thoughts. And that's a prerequisite for, leaving Earth or the Earth simulation. And I know one of your podcast guests said simulation. And I was, just to digress for a second, is that I was thinking, well, you could explain it by saying that the Earth and the reality that we're in is fully wave-based. So you don't have to say simulation or matrix. But it just surprised me at how much everything vibrated and how much, you had all these different things that are kind of going more and more toward the idea that reality is fully wave-based. But then when you look at it to say that thoughts can ride waves, that just adds a whole new dimension to the study of physics and all these other things that are going on. Yes. And validates the existence of clairvoyance and other things, that mediumship that people do, and that it isn't something unusual, paranormal, or woo-woo. It's something that aligns with the laws of physics.
Yeah.
So that's where I am with all that.
So to go back to the vibration being like a radio wave, there's certain types of mediumship, particularly the trance channeling, that sometimes is exactly that. It's like a radio signal that's being broadcast. And sometimes I describe my head as being the satellite dish. And it's like I have to point my head in the right direction to be able to pick up that wave. And in a lot of channeled literature, there has been talk about it, like specifically being like a narrow band frequency that's being sent out across time and space. Yeah.
Right. And one of the more unusual things I read, which I thought was really interesting, was, and I talked about planets and celestial bodies vibrating. One of the things I read said that galaxies vibrate at like 52 octaves below middle C, if you can imagine something like that. And if you think of the wavelength you have to stretch across the universe, or not the universe, but a galaxy, it would have to be a very long wave, which would be at a very low wavelength. Or very low frequency to get that big of a wavelength. And I was just wanting to say, that's kind of interesting. It don't have anything to back it up with. I just thought it was an interesting.
Well, I had just seen an article about them, a scientific group saying that they had discovered that black holes make a sound. Yeah.
I saw a recent video on that as well. And maybe if I can include something in your YouTube recording of this, I could give you something to put down in the chat with some of these links, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
For sure.
We wanted to put up, you had a question for the chat that we thought we would put up as a poll.
Let me ask one question before we get off this topic, or I'll forget. Okay. So we were talking about vibrations, and going off what Mark had actually asked there, Jenny, to ask you, do you think there's a certain vibration in terms of your emotions or where you're at that allows you to connect better, or than, like, say, like you're in a good mood or you're in a relaxed mood as opposed to being angry, where you're able to receive information better?
Yes. And actually the class I'm taking right now, we were just talking about that the other day, that when you are having a hard day, for whatever reasons it might be, it's much more difficult to do that kind of work than it is when you're in a good state of mind.
So possibly looking at like emotional or, yeah, I guess emotional vibrations to a certain
And
degree
how
could be the
those
same way.
emotions affect your thoughts too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I've thought the couple of experiences I've had where I've been able to produce some kind of what I would consider mediumship. Both times I was almost in very positive frame of mind, like a really cool event that was happening, or just like really at ease, really at calm. It's never happened to me when I've been like upset because the person in front of me didn't use their blinker or something like, you know what I mean? So that would make sense to a certain degree. And I think all of this has some connection, hypothetically, to string. Do we think this is all related?
Do you want to go there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll go anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I have to rely on some theosophical clairvoyant work that they did 100 years ago. And there was a book called Occult Chemistry that you can get in PDF form online. And 3 versions came out. The last version was in 1953. But up at the front in the first or second chapter, they talked about something that was smaller than a quark. If you're familiar with subatomic particles, you have protons and neutrons in the nucleus of an atom. But within each proton and neutron are 3 quarks. And what occult chemistry says is that there's 3 things called or 3 instances of a thing called an anu. And I may have mentioned this on a previous podcast because I like talking about it. But that determines whether you have an up quark or a down quark, which in turn dictates whether you have a proton or a neutron. Mm. And if you dissect an anu, it looks like a little heart-shaped whirl of loops. But if you dissect it, you get 10 loops. So that agrees with what string theory is saying, that at the very smallest thing you have loops or strings. But no one's ever seen an anu or proved it. Clairvoyants saw it 100 years ago when they were doing the write-up for this book. And another guy in the 1800s, late 1800s, 1890s, described the anu as well, although he called it the ultimate atom. So Theosophical Society stuff will tell you that. And I'll put in another plug for them, is I think the 100-year-old Theosophical Society books are the best knowledge base of the non-physical in the world. And if not the best, it's one of the best. But not a lot of people know about it. Anybody or any books by Charles Leadbeater or Arthur Powell. Arthur Powell wrote 5 books. And one thing that's unique about his books is he put his sources in the margin of each page. And if you get all 5 of his books and read what he talks about the etheric body, the astral body, the mental body, and the causal body, and then he talks about the spiritual development process in the solar system, his 5 books refer to probably, I think, like 50 or 60 theosophical books. Wow. So it's like a gateway to understanding all these different things that different people have written about. And it's all internally consistent too, which I thought was really good. And in one of the books that Leadbeater wrote, he talked about the process that they go through to vet what people come up with or what they say. And he said you had to have 2 independent researchers see the same thing or believe the same thing. Then they had to go to a third person, like a mentor, someone who had a background in it, to also agree with it before they decided to print it. Wow. So it was a rigorous process, if you wanted to call it that. But there were only maybe like a dozen, I believe, clairvoyants, if that. There weren't a lot of people who were writing about that 100 years ago, but that's some of the best information on the non-physical dimensions. And I've relied on it in my books, starting with the 3rd book that I did.
Well, that citation's always good for that reason alone.
Mhm.
because if you know where that person got their information, then the paper trail, is there.
Yeah.
It helps justify that in addition to finding the paper trail and stuff, just the internal consistency of what they wrote about.
Mhm.
That's what I really liked about it. And that plays up to the things that I wrote about in my book. And then these whole ideas of vibration being, throughout the universe. And then I think I mentioned the last time I was here, a hierarchy of toruses. I showed a torus,
Yeah.
Yes.
talked about that. There's a diagram in the book called The Solar System that Arthur Powell wrote, where he showed how every planet in the universe, in multiple dimensions of those planets, or not the universe, in the solar system, the 7 planets or 8 planets in the solar system, they each are involved in the spiritual development process. And it's not only the physical dimension, but all the other dimensions as well, the etheric, astral, mental, causal, and formless. And supposedly we came from Mars to come here and do our work on Earth. And then after we leave Earth, we're going to the backside of Mercury. So, and then before Mars, we were on the moon, not necessarily in the physical dimension,
Mhm.
but, in another dimension doing work as a non-physical being. And that design of the petals showing all the different planets that are involved in spiritual development. And then they had circles within circles and then circles within those circles of circles. That was this hierarchy of tori, hierarchy of toruses, which I had written about in my 4th book, which I thought was a nice validation.
Yeah. And that's something that in the spiritual communities is getting talked about a lot, is that the planet being on a spiritual evolution, and that that the whole earth is like moving up to this next level.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very interesting.
So I'll do one thing if I can pull it off.
Mhm.
Is to do a spiritual or a wave-based interpretation of the rapture that they talk about in Christian scripture and Revelation, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Talk about whatever.
Okay, so before I start, I'll think about people with a high vibration being born on the planet. People coming from or beings coming from a higher dimension down to Earth. They have a higher vibration of their own. And think of those people as being like the lead ducks in a V formation of ducks migrating south. They're the ones who are going to take the lead in making the path or building the path of higher vibration. Now, I'll go back to this torus thing that I wrote about in my 4th book, that the magnetosphere of the Earth, I say it's not only one torus, which is a donut shaped shape, but 2, that there's a torus within a torus. And the donut shaped torus is the one on the outside, but inside you have one that looks like a tire. Mm-hmm. And instead of having all the little tori in the core of the donut shaped torus, the little tori are spread throughout the tire shaped torus. And the shape that they have, the way that this 3D printed model that I have, the shape that they have is the shape of ley lines across the planet. So you see this crisscross, and at every intersection point, you have a smaller torus. But that's, not necessarily in the physical dimension, but it's there helping with the consciousness or the conscious entities, people on the planet, the humans on the planet. But they're vibrating at a near frequency to maybe make a jump into another reality. If you wanted to say the Schumann resonance and their harmonics are different realities in the physical dimension. So we're at 7.83 hertz, and the next one is like 13 or 14 hertz. But if you have these high-level people, high-level beings incarnating on the Earth, being the lead ducks to help everybody else vibrate at a higher frequency. I'm going to throw in a third thing, too, is when you talk about quantum entanglement and quantum jumping, that's probably more the thing. where you have electrons in an atom that when the electrons get energized, they get higher energy, they jump immediately to the next orbital. They don't gradually go up or gradually go down when they lose energy, but they jump. And the thought is that when you get more than half of the electrons in an orbital that receive that extra energy, that's when they jump, is at 51%. So you could say with the rapture is that all these higher level beings vibrating at this higher frequency, leading in the V formation of all the people at each different point in the ley lines around the planet. When those people who are vibrating higher and higher reach that next level at 51%, they all jump.
Well,
this brings up
let's get on it, people. Can we get to the 51% already?
There you go.
That actually brings up a really interesting topic because in the spiritualist world right now, with a lot of people that I follow who are psychic mediums or channelers or energy healers, all kinds of things, there is kind of a message that seems to be kind of the same through all of these thoughts, which is essentially there are groups of people who are getting ready to level up. Mm-hmm. They're gonna get their character sheet out and get some new abilities and all kinds of things like in a video game, and begin to exist on a different plane. Mm-hmm. And this has been, I mean, I guess I became aware of it maybe a couple of years ago, but this message keeps getting, and I'd never really heard it before, except for maybe the idea of the rapture. But couldn't those things be the same thing?
They could. That's another way to explain it. I was going to say if you wanted to talk about leveling up or purifying your body's vibrations, you get rid of the lower level vibrations, if you want to say like fear, mm-hmm. guilt, shame. And Dr. David Hawkins wrote about all these different emotions and where they would fall on a scale of 0 to 1,000 in his book, The Map of Consciousness. So he was talking about these lower level vibrations. You need to get rid of those. And the way you do that is to do your shadow work. Jenny, you may understand that more. Yes. And people on the call may understand this more. But you have to go into all the things that trigger you. If you get triggered during the day, something that makes you angry or, come up with any different emotion that is not yourself, not positive. It could be something related back to your childhood. When you were 5 or 6 years old, your sibling picked you up and shook you, and that could have traumatized you or whatever. Or I guess in my case, my sister, to punish me, she made me watch horror movies when I was 5 or 6 years old.
Goodness.
So I can't watch a horror movie now, but I've been doing that shadow work, not dark shadows, but I've been doing that shadow work. But the way you would increase your vibrations is to get rid of those lower vibrating pieces out of your aura or your Taurus field. If you wanted to talk about that, there's different names for it. But everyone needs to be thinking about doing their shadow work. And then the other thing, and I mentioned this about controlling thoughts, is, and I thought this was an interesting way to think about controlling your thoughts, because you think if I'm meditating, I want to go into a state of samadhi where my brain functions just stop, and that may be a way to think about controlling thoughts. But I saw an interesting write-up about what thoughts to control, or how your thoughts are put together. And I'll read something just to make sure I get it right.
Okay.
Is think about how you would think about an apple, and how your senses prepare that for that thought. Your senses may see your eyes may see a red globe. Your ears hear a crunching noise. You would feel the smoothness of the outside of the skin or the crispness of the tissue inside. You would taste a sweet flavor, and you would smell an apple odor. That's what your 5 senses would tell you. But it's your mind that puts all that together to say it's an apple. And that's what you need to control is that I think they've called it common sense. It's a different definition of common sense, but that's what they were calling it a number of years ago. But if you think about how your mind controls your five senses, it acknowledges the existence of some things, but it could also hide others, hide the existence of others. And you may have heard these stories of Native Americans in the Caribbean when Columbus came, that they didn't see the ships until they saw the longboats coming ashore with Columbus and the people on it.
I have to stop you right there, Mark.
Okay.
Because you just hit on something that I've heard before. That they didn't see the ships.
They didn't. It's what I've read.
Yeah.
It's what I've read.
And I read that before. And then when I went back to kind of research it, I couldn't find it anywhere.
Okay.
But it is absolutely amazing, because I've told that story so many, as I talked about before, at a gathering, maybe 3 or 4 beers in, and I'm like, like they don't see the ships, like because they can't comprehend the idea of like that could exist. Like it's not in their worldview. And then I'm like, I need to look this up so I have more information about it. So when I talk to people about this, and I'll sound like a lunatic, and then I couldn't find it. So it's absolutely amazing to hear you say that, because I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. So do you have any more information about that?
I have a link I'll send you.
Excellent.
Well, I have another example of that as an art teacher.
Okay.
And I always use the example of the apple. So this is perfect.
Cool.
When you're learning how to draw realistically, you have to reprogram your brain, because your brain sees an apple and it automatically knows what an apple is, because you've had that experience before. But no 2 apples are the same. Some have dents, some have little fingernail pricks in it. Some are lumpy, some are sideways, some have a stem, some don't have a stem. They have all kinds of different colors to them. So when you're learning how to draw realistically, you have to tell your brain really to shut up, because your brain is going to say, I know what an apple looks like. And it's going to draw this little apple shape that's really a symbol for apple and not actually what the apple looks like. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I love it. And I love putting the two together. I mean, what you just described is a perfect example or a perfect analogy for how you have to turn off that common sense.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's great.
Because our brains are trying to make life easier for us by making it go faster. Art, I know what an apple is.
Yeah. Art is definitely a doorway into looking at things differently. If you want to change how you look at the world, or just try to just for an opportunity to perceive things differently, you should definitely just go take some kind of art class at a community center even, or something like that. Because I took one photography class that Jenny kind of encouraged me to take when I was in college. I took a photography class, and it completely revolutionized the way that I thought for like the rest of the summer, because just like you said, we go outside, we take photos, and it's like, you have to pay attention to the color, and these colors go together, and whatever. And it's like, okay, I'm going to take a picture of this tree, and that's green. Take a picture of something that's just green, and you like, go take a picture of the tree. It's got green leaves on it. That's green. But then, the teacher's sitting there at the computer when you're editing the photo, and they're like, oh, look at that purple color there, and look at that green, and those colors go so nice together, and you got this hint of yellow in there. And it's like, all of a sudden, there's like 20 colors in this photograph that I never would have, that your mind never would have said was there.
Your brain said it was a green tree.
Yeah. It's a green tree, but it's not a green tree. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So it works really well.
And especially what Jenny said is you have to reprogram how you think. And to relate that to thoughts. I mean, that's perfect. And also too, the same thing with light, what you were saying, Frosty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where I've realized after that it changed the way I looked at things. I've kind of gone back, because I haven't been doing photography like I was there for a while. But when I was doing photography, I noticed that when I looked at things, I saw it differently than I did before I started taking photographs. So things can change. Perception can change. Does reality change?
Right. Speaking of reality, I'll give you another thought thing too, is talking about controlling your thoughts, is that, you've seen these Marvel Comics movies where Magneto's doing all these things to all these missiles, and stuff, and just people that have tremendous, if you wanted to say spiritual abilities or psychic abilities or whatever, and you say, how do we get that, or how could we get that? Just as you have thoughts that, we talked about doing your shadow work or whatever, or even your thoughts of what an apple is, that thought of what a missile is or what your abilities are have to be reprogrammed as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I read about this is just you have to undo your thought of what Reiki is or your healing is or whatever. You have to undo that thought, because just as a doubt that something will work will stop this, your thought of how something works will stop the magnification of whatever it is. You have to undo that, and that's another reason to control your thoughts, or to get control over your common sense.
That's another thing that comes up a lot in readings, specifically for us, for some reason, is that thoughts are things.
Right.
Like that gets brought up so much, and yeah, I think it just has to do with everything you're talking about.
Yeah. So, do you know how thoughts are things, or how thoughts become things?
Tell us.
I'm glad you asked. So, again, I'll rely on some Theosophical Society stuff. But they talk about how your consciousness comes into Earth. Mm-hmm. Is it descends from, if you want to use the torus analogy, from a big torus, which you could call your higher level self, as just a little bit of consciousness that comes down through the upper dimensions, from the higher mental to the lower mental to the astral to the etheric. But when it goes through the higher and lower mental and the astral, it does work. You have this consciousness that has to develop. I mean, it's all part of a big cloud, is what they call the elemental essence. But it has to develop, to go down into form. And when you get to the form-based part of Earth, which, is the physical dimension, that it starts out, if you can imagine, as minerals or crystals, and you may, from some of your work, Jenny, and I don't know, Frosty, if you've done this, is feeling energy or whatever from crystals, or getting a response from them. And just as an aside, and I hope I don't lose my train of thought, is that one way you can see how a crystal resonates with you is to put it in front of your different chakra points. Mm-hmm. And if you can feel the energy, in your chakra points, then you know that crystal is resonating with you. But the consciousness comes into form in minerals, rocks, and crystals, goes to plants, goes to animals, and then goes to humans. But when you get to animals and humans, your thoughts and the animal thoughts that are emanated from the body travel, just like what I was saying, that a clairvoyant can pick it up. Mm-hmm. But these conscious clouds in the non-physical dimensions, in the lower mental and in the astral, pick those thoughts up and embody them. And that's how you say thoughts have power or body or meaning. Mm-hmm. And the strength and consistency of your thought determines the strength of the thought form, and that's the word for it. And there's actually a Theosophical Society book on it, Thought Forms. It depends on the clearness of your concentration, your focus, your intention, what you want the intention to be, and your visualization. And if you can visualize what you want to happen with all 5 of your senses, all the better. But that's one of the ways and one of the applications of it, you could say, is intercessory prayer. Is if you're praying for somebody, and there's a lady who wrote a book, Lynn McTaggart wrote a book, The Power of 8, where she talked about at her conferences that she did, she broke everybody up into groups of 8, and they prayed for each one of the people and had these, significant things happen to them when she checked up on them afterwards. But it's the power of these thought forms, and especially in a group, getting them to have a common intention and a common visualization when they're doing that, because the stronger your concentration is, the more clearly defined the thought form is. And what those thought forms do, especially in intercessory prayer, is if you pray for a particular person, those thought forms will hover around that person until they're at a point to where the thought form can work on them or act on them, and then they'll do their business. That's Theosophical Society stuff. But one thing that's interesting is these same things of concentration, focus, intention, and visualization are the same characteristics of spell casting. And I may have mentioned that before too. But it's real and it works. Most people just think that to pray for somebody, you just say, and be with so-and-so and do this and do that. And it's not necessarily the case. You need to concentrate, you need to focus. And then the Power of Eight book, Lynn McTaggart mentions playing soft music to relax you, and just as we were talking about earlier. And then how everything needs to emanate from your heart. Your heart vibrations are the strongest ones. So what you think, what you visualize, you need to just imagine putting all that on an elevator and taking it from your brain down to your heart and letting it flow out from your heart. But that's what makes it all work. And there really is a technique that works. And these things do have power and significance, but that's the way you do it.
Well, that's...
Or the way I've read about it. This is an intellectual side, not the experiential side so much.
Yeah.
Well, I can bring up the experiential side. So I don't think that either Jenny or I have a lot of experience with proper magic, like spell casting and something I think we've always been interested in, but we've never actually delved into. There's just been other things that we've done instead. But we recently did do a stream where we did a spell jar, and we did a luck spell jar. And, part of me is, doing the intention and, having the idea that this is going to work to try to manifest that thing. But there's also a side of, I think both of us, definitely me, that also wants to test it out.
Right,
what kind of results happen? And maybe they don't happen overnight, but this is something that could happen. So we decided that we would go play the lottery. We don't play the lottery very often. I think we talked about this before. I mean, we may play it once every couple of years. There's been a couple times, I bought like $1 scratch ticket and got on a heater with it where I kept winning dollars or free tickets or something for a couple of weeks until, I didn't get my free ticket. But this time we bought a scratch off ticket, which gave us opportunity for more tickets. And we ended up winning not enough to build the Witching Hour studio, but we won $60 off a $2 ticket.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but we did just do a luck spell jar.
I'm trying to remember too. Didn't we also get a check from some other refund thing from refinancing the house at the same time?
Yeah, that's always the thing. Like when things just seem to appear when you need them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I would say that, you can explain it away, but to a certain extent, if the evidence is looking at you right in the face, why are you going to deny it? And then if you're not accepting that, then are you putting out energy that's not going to allow those things to manifest in the future?
Right.
Right.
And that's another thing that I know Lynn McTaggart talked about. I'd hate to go back to her, but she wrote it down and documented it all, is you need to follow up on what you prayed for. Not only for what happened to the person you prayed for, but what happened to you. Because there's positive benefits that happen whenever you do these things, not only for the person who needs to be healed or needs to find a job or, improve their emotional or physical or spiritual life or whatever, but they can happen to you as well. Yeah. And again, that'll get back to wave physics. If you wanted to take it down a notch to these vibrations and what happens, if you wish something or spell cast something to somebody in a negative way, and they don't have any negative in them, it bounces back to you. And that's, like just shaking a rope that's tied to a wall, that wave comes back.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
And that's a whole other area of physics for people to do experiments and tests on.
Yeah. Linguist was also saying that the higher your overall frequency, the more powerful your manifestation is.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
she also wanted to tell you, she said, Mark, I confirm from an experience of my own doing all the stuff, and it worked for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good. Well, thank you, linguist. And I'm glad you're on.
And I think, this all goes back. We've had this conversations a lot of times on this show, but, whether it's prayer, no matter what religion that is,
Mhm.
or witchcraft or magic or spells or whatever ritual that's connected with,
Or just intention.
intention, manifesting, all those
Mhm.
things. It's like all different words for essentially what is the same thing.
Same thing.
Right. Right. And I would encourage people who are doing things or using things, like I would say pendulums would be the easiest thing. Is you're actually enhancing the vibration of your body so that you could see it. Is all these things that people do or use, whether they be cards or runes or whatever, try doing it with your own body energy. Try to say, I'm going to develop my clairvoyant skills. I'm going to develop, some of these other skills, because that's what they are. They're skills or abilities that your non-physical bodies use in their dimension. That's my impression of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing is decreasing the reliance on physical dimension things to pick up the more pure energy work.
Mm-hmm.
With that. And I'd like to know what people on the call are thinking about that too, if that's something to do or not do or whatever, or just something to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens.
And like
What do you guys think? Let us know.
Manifesting, like instead of like people think of like having an ability and then using that to manifest, but what about manifesting the ability?
Oh,
Yeah.
I've never thought of that.
You just blew up everybody's brains just then.
That's what you want to do on these calls.
I wish that I could do this. We have that a lot.
Yeah.
We've had questions before in our streams. Am I a medium? Am I?
Mhm.
Well, you are what you think what you are, what you think you are to a certain degree, I guess,
Right.
Yeah.
And it's important too to, as linguist said, is to increase your vibration. And the way you do that goes back to this shadow work is purifying your spirit, your mind, your heart, doing this work to make your thoughts more pure. And that raises your vibration, which would also help you gain access to these abilities too, which are really in your non-physical bodies. And the closer you vibrate to, if you want to say your higher level self, the more, or the closer you get to this, if you wanted to say from a religious standpoint, this union with God, or it's a rejoining of this of your self with a higher level self. And when enough of those entities do that, that's what allows your higher level self to ascend. If you go back to this hierarchy of Torah thing.
That's what linguist said in the rest of that comment. She said, the higher your overall frequency, the more powerful the manifestation of that thought will be, because there will be no blocking energy that would prevent that thought from manifesting, because it would vibrate at a frequency closer to that of the creator.
Cool.
That's pretty much exactly what you just said.
Cool. Yeah. And we didn't talk
same
before
wavelength
we
going on.
I think you guys were just talking about memes earlier.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. All right. So before we get back onto something, we were talking earlier about doing a poll.
Yes.
Because Mark, you had in our discussion through email earlier, you had a question.
Yes.
For people with spiritual abilities or who have had spiritual experiences, have they convinced you that other dimensions exist? So what me and Jenny were talking about when we were prepping for the show today was let's put that up as a poll. I don't know what the maximum amount of time is on the
10
poll.
minutes.
Okay, so we're going to put up a 10-minute poll. That way people coming in and out have plenty of time to answer, and we'll see what kind of numbers we get.
Have you been convinced that there are other dimensions exist?
So
it's
feel
going
free
right now. Vote.
Put your, if you're in chat, hit up that poll so, get as many responses as we can here to find out. So if you've had, if you have spiritual abilities or had experiences, has that convinced you that other dimensions are real? And we'll see what we get from that.
Well, I'll just add a little thing to that. Thank you for doing the poll.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying I'm more experiential, or have been doing more experiential work, is I'm realizing how important it is to live it. It's one thing to have an intellectual understanding of these things, but you can attend lectures and seminars and conferences your whole life and not really apply it. But it's when you actively go out and love other people and have compassion for people and stand up for people that, other people are trying to bully or whatever, have this moral courage and have perseverance to stick with it and not fall back. That's the application of all these things that people talk about. And that's what I think is really important, because you're not going to go anywhere just by knowing it or learning it. And that was kind of the trap I got into with it when I was writing my books. But it's important for everybody to be able to apply it. But to apply it, you have to believe it. And I'm asking the question to force people to think about it, because you can have all these experiences and still not really fully believe it to the point to say, I'm changing my life to do these things and these things because of what I believe and feel and think. But it's important to move beyond the intellectual.
Well, I don't know if we've talked about this before, and if we have and I've forgotten, I apologize. But have you ever gone into the experimental phase with crystals and things like that to try them out on your side yet?
I have, and this was part of the work I did before I published my books, is I spent 3 years doing workshops with a lady who was a medium clairvoyant, and she had a small group that she was working with, and we went through runes and tarot, crystals. She did like a 3-month thing on different crystals. All these things were great, but I wanted to experience them so I could write about them. I didn't want to write about things I didn't know, but they work. They all work. And I've had the experience, but one thing that you don't get from some of these experiences is that confirmation that the non-physical exists, and the only 2 things that I've ever found that people really had a definitive feeling about the existence of the non-physical. And I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast, is, what's his name? Campbell. Anyway, the guy who wrote My Big Toe, for My Big Theory of Everything. On page 85, he talked about how he helped Robert Monroe build his HemiSync labs in Virginia, and how Robert, to compensate him and his other engineering school friend for helping build the lab, he helped them take the out-of-body course and stuff like that and learn some of these things how to go out of body. One day he had both, I think Thomas Campbell is his name. He had Campbell and Campbell's friend in different rooms doing an out-of-body experience. And Monroe recorded everything that he said, in directing both of them. And they went out for like an hour and a half. And when everything was over, Monroe called him up to the control room and he replayed the recordings. And the things that they saw and did and felt were within like 20 or 30 seconds of each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Campbell wrote in his book, he said, that was the time that I started saying, this thing could possibly be real. This may be real. This may be real. And that totally changed his life. And a lot of the things that he's doing now is as a direct result of that one experience he had.
It was Tom Campbell. I looked it up for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But page 85 in My Big Toe, is where that quote was. And the other thing that I read, or really someone told me that I thought would work, was a group. It was a, what should I say? It was a group meditation, but it was two people going out to, together and holding hands, lying on a bed, holding hands with each other. And they would go out and have the same experience and go through this guided meditation. And they would see the same things and experience the same things, see the same things appear and disappear. And that was another kind of confirmation that, and I actually heard that this is what the mystery schools do to help people realize that what they see and feel and think in the non-physical is actually real. But those are the only two things I found in all my years that would be something that you could really hang your hat on with a confirmation. I don't know if y'all have, or if there's something you could think of that would lead to that.
Well, in mediumship, the confirmation, validation from the living about things that there's no way you could have known about, of someone speaking to you from a different place, different dimension, I think could be some validation there as well.
I don't know if I've gotten any evidence that there's other dimensions. Not that I don't think they exist. I know there's things that are going on. I mean, obviously, I live with a working medium, so I get evidence every day. Even this morning, I got evidence. In my house, there's always like, okay, I appreciate that. But as far as other dimensions go, I don't know if I've experienced other dimensions. And like I said, I have had a couple times where I've been able to do mediumship, but I don't know if, I mean, I guess that would be, if we consider the afterlife to be a different dimension, but I don't know 100% yet if I'm convinced and that's what that is like a completely different plane, or whether that's right alongside us in this dimension. I don't know.
Right. So I'll give you one other thing that I saw in these theosophical books. Is I actually saw an illustration that showed the path that consciousness takes going down through the dimensions. They call it an involution, until you get to form as a mineral, and that starts your evolution going back up in these physical dimension and the non-physical dimensions. But one of the things that this illustration showed, which made a lot of sense to me, is, and I mentioned this, I think, in my email to you about, what I was working on and talking about, is the purpose for human existence on Earth is to individualize our consciousness. Because if we're going to go on for more spiritual development on other planets or on the galaxy or the universe, if we're going to become a planetary consciousness or the consciousness for a star or a galaxy or something larger, you have to have an individual spirit. And you're coming into the Earth existence in a cloud of energy, a conscious energy. And as you go into form, you get more and more diverse, but you get more and more individualized. And it's humans that they have an individual spirit, but they still have a higher level self. But at some point, when you do the shadow work, you purify your heart and your spirit, you actually become an independent, individualized spirit. And that's what I think, and I hope I don't get in trouble with the religious community. I think that's what the definition of salvation is the independent individualization of your consciousness so that you can move on for further development, further spiritual development. But that's what I think the existence of us, of humanity on Earth is. And then the existence of the universe that's the future of where our consciousness would go to be the conscious entity like Gaia over Earth or over the sun or over another planet. And then the different dimensions can have different spirits on the same planet too, which I thought was interesting. I read that somewhere as well.
And you know what the really weird thing about the whole thing is?
Yes.
Is that the assumption is that we're doing all of this independent work to become individualized, but then the ultimate goal is to just go back to source to begin with.
Mm.
It's like that big loop
Correct.
of the torus, I guess.
But because your independent consciousness goes back to be like a small torus in this larger torus, which is an even larger consciousness, and it keeps going up like if you want to say like a Ponzi scheme, or I don't know what other examples there would be to be similar to that, but it just grows and grows and grows. Yeah. And even to the point to where you could become the consciousness for an entire universe. And if you wanted to go beyond that, that's where Ben Bentov or Itzhak Bentov wrote about in his 2 books, Stalking the Wild Pendulum and A Brief Tour of Consciousness. But he actually outlined what happens beyond the universe. And he's the only guy I ever saw that wrote that. Going back to the Theosophical Society's occult chemistry, if you break down each of those 10 string loops, they look like little grains of rice. And there's 7 different dimensions of those grains of rice that make up that loop. So there's even smaller things that go on, but they go into different dimensions. But that little grain of rice in an anu is the same shape of what Bentov described as a universe. So you have this going from the very large to the very small.
Yeah.
And that would be the loop outside of the universe to do it. So everybody could be the god of their own universe, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that brings up really interesting questions, because we talk about the universe the way that we understand the universe as humans, or the way that we have understood it as this, 3-dimensional realm that's so vast. We talked about in the news today about trying to find, possibly maybe discovering at least microbial life on another planet. Is it even possible that there's other dimensions within the same dimension that we're in? Like, is everything the same in that solar system that could be 200 light years away? Or is there even other galaxies that would have the same exact rules that exist in our dimension? Or could, I don't know, it become, because of the size of the universe, it starts to become, even just understanding our universe becomes complicated.
Right. So, and then going back to Jenny Lee's mediumship, she's talking with people in the astral dimension. So that's showing that another dimension, just even here on Earth, is inhabited. So you've got just those 2. You could go up to the mental, and you talk about heaven and the existence of angels and other deities and things. That could be true too in a wave-based reality where you have energy, conscious entities that are waveforms in and of themselves as well.
So we had the results of the poll, and it was 9 people. 9 people said yes, they do think that there are other dimensions based on their experiences, and 1 person said they weren't sure, but nobody said no.
Cool. Yeah. That's great. Well, so thank you all for doing the poll.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to keep going on that topic real quick, because we were talking about that. So when we talk about another dimension and someone, passes, they go to the higher density or whatever, and they experience this other dimension, going back to source, whatever we call it, heaven. But they're still kind of around Earth. So I think you were just kind of hitting on a second ago. If you have an alien life form and they pass away and they go back to source or heaven or whatever you want to define that, but they're still hanging around Macular B, like even then you almost have sectionalism in what could be the next dimension. I don't know, that's an interesting idea, that there's even different layers of afterlife for different things. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities there.
Right. And one way they explain it is with the term interpenetration. And I may have talked about this before, but an analogy for it is to take a 2-gallon glass jar and you put rocks in it and you say, is it full? you say, no, there's gaps between the rocks. So you put pebbles between, into the jar, shake it and let the rock settle. And is it full still? No, there's space between the pebbles. So you pour sand in there and shake it. And then finally it's full. But it's all in there together. And they say that, the rocks and the pebbles and the sand all interpenetrate each other. And they say that's what happens with the different dimensions, is that there's no dimension up there or down there. It's all in the same spot. And it may be, I think it's at a lower density instead of a higher density as you ascend, which when you look at your aura, you have your etheric so close to you because it's the most dense, and then your astral dimension body, and then your mental dimension body after that. And it's less and less dense. So that's why they're bigger and bigger for the same size.
I was taking I'm taking a trance class right now. We're reading another 100-year-old book from this entity called Silver Birch that was channeled through a medium. And I had to find it in my notes because it's exactly what we were talking about just now. Talking about when people pass over, why they stay close. He said, where their love is, they are.
Right.
It's like, so the people, the things that matter the most to them, that's where they stay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the people in when we say higher dimensions, but it's not necessarily higher, but people in these less dense dimensions or beings in the less dense dimensions can see what's going on in the physical. We may not be able to see them, but they can see us. And so that's how you have.
And those thoughts are going all over the place. Those wave thoughts.
Yes. And your thoughts, of loving someone and missing someone, they are felt and heard. Just like a medium can talk to someone in the non-physical, then someone in the non-physical can hear or feel those thoughts and vibrations that you're putting out here in the physical.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool. And I really envy mediums because they can validate, the afterlife and things. And that's one of the spiritual abilities, I think, that has that interface or interplay or whatever. And that gives you, through the multitude of people that you speak to in an astral dimension or whatever, that gives you that certain kind of confidence that helps. Another thing I heard talking about, the afterlife is, we hear people talk about the tunnel that folks go through. I had one person who was an invisible helper who helped people through the tunnel. And they said it's the people who, or the entities that are destined to reincarnate and come back, who go through the tunnel. If you go through the tunnel, you're going to reincarnate and come back. But this person would escort people outside of the tunnel to the afterlife. And that was something that
there's a loophole around the tunnel.
Oh, it's not a loophole. Is that you can go through the tunnel or
not? I guess some
other
way.
But the more advanced consciousness wouldn't necessarily have to go through the tunnel.
Well, that's interesting because I talk about Art Bell quite a bit on this show, and Coast to Coast back in the day. Art Bell had a guest on, and this has been so long ago, I can't remember who the guest was. So I'm not going to try to remember, but it left an impression with him. The person, his guest, had told him that when you go to the other side, that you are not supposed to go to the light. Don't go to the light is what he told Art Bell. So,
I remember that episode.
Art Bell, whenever he had someone on who was talking about the afterlife and other dimensions and all that, would always say, "Are you supposed to go to the light?" And many people would say yes, and some people would say I don't know, and some people would say, every once in a while you hear no, but that kind of, your question there kind of and statement kind of brings to mind that idea of maybe there is a choice. Maybe, you go through the light, you come born back into the world, you don't go into the light, you experience the others.
You may still come back, you just be in a higher level of the astral.
Yeah. But because I always thought to myself, why wouldn't, if you see a bright light and you realize that you passed on, wouldn't that be your natural reaction? But
right.
Maybe there is a choice and there isn't really a bad answer.
Right. Or maybe that choice is made for you depending on your vibration.
That's true.
The vibration of your consciousness. You may not have a choice. You're either going to get sucked up in it or not. I don't know.
I think a lot to me, it seems also that sometimes what people experience in the afterlife is based on what they thought was going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's those thoughts.
Manifesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've heard that about people with, certain religious experiences. If they believe they're going to go to Sheol or some place where some in-between place, they do go to a place where they just sleep for 1,000 years or whatever, or hundreds of years, but they'll eventually wake up and do that. But you're right. Whatever you believe, that's what'll happen. Just like, when you're looking for a particular angel or a Buddha or Christ or whatever, that's what you'll see.
Yeah. And I think that some of that might also be the other consciousnesses in the experience showing up in a way that we can understand.
Correct. That sounds right.
Like if we thought we were going to see Jesus when we died, then we're going to see Jesus. But if we thought we were going to see Krishna when we died, then we're going to see Krishna. Like we were talking about that in my class this week.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
Well, let's take this opportunity to welcome, and we have some Raiders coming into the stream tonight. Reptar, thank you so much for bringing your community over to the Witching Hours tonight. You guys, if you want to hang out, are in for some interesting discussion here. We have Mark Hunter Brooks on the program tonight. And, well, we're talking about, I guess, at the core, the nature of the universe, the nature of reality.
Consciousness, spirit.
What is reality? Are we living in a simulation?
I think we
all
can
of these
probably
things.
Add more things to that list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those good questions.
CMC
so welcome in. We appreciate you being here.
All of this discussion is why I enjoy having Mark on the Witching Hours.
Thank you, Air Boss. That. So I was going to say too, one benefit of like an illustration saying that, the purpose of your existence on earth is to individualize your spirit. That helps give you a direction in terms of your own spiritual development, why it's important to purify your mind and your heart, why it's important to control your thoughts as well as your emotions and your ego. But also too, when you have a choice to go to, conference A, B, C, D, or E, you'll say, which one will give me the greatest opportunity to raise my vibration, to become an independent, individualized spirit or individualized consciousness. And that's one thing that until just recently, and this is part of what led me down this path, was that illustration, is to have that end goal or that objective that I would know, instead of just saying, well, I think I'll go to, a lecture on this or a lecture on that. And I've said this before, is people who go to different religious denominations or synagogues or churches or temples or whatever, they go to the classes, they go to the ceremonies, they do participate in the rituals, they go to the conferences and the seminars, but they don't really have a clue as to how it's all put together. But if you have an endpoint or an objective that could help you, decide where you are in this walk and where you need to go. And that was one thing I really liked out of that illustration. I believe the illustration, but I think it's another thing. It's incumbent on you to do your own spiritual journey and your own spiritual path and come to your own realization, which may or may not be what I feel or what I've experienced. And that's good. It's like whatever you do here on earth, that's what you were meant to do. And there's nothing bad. And one thing that I also read that I really liked and resonated with is all the incarnations that people can do, not carnation instant breakfast or condensed milk or whatever, but incarnation is you'll come back as beings or personalities that are both good and evil, that are both victims and the victimizers, people with great wealth or great poverty. You're going to experience all these things, and it's not bad. You may wish for things and struggle for things, but it's there for you to learn. And if you look at it in terms of your spiritual development or your conscious development, and you will realize you have a unique path or a unique journey on the planet, and you can't compare it with anybody else. And I know that a lot of people get really anxious or frustrated because they compare their worst traits with other people's best traits. And they say, oh, woe is me, or whatever. And if you realize your path in life, the things you were born into and the things you do, that's unique to you, and you can't compare it with anybody else. And I think that gives some people, some solace there, as far as where they are. And then I also like to say that one of the purposes of struggles that you have, be it, working in the work world or economically or socially or whatever, that's a spiritual test. And that as you rise, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which looks like a triangle, you rise up this hierarchy to get, closer to self-actualization and creativity and things. But when you reach that top, you start being tested, and the goal is to see how much you can lose. This is my opinion, not something else. But my opinion is you have all these things knocked away from you to see how much you can lose and still love other people and have compassion and mercy for other people and not withdraw into yourself. And I think the more advanced you are with your consciousness, and the more you realize that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, the more you'll trust, that things will work out for you, and that things that happen to you are meant to enlarge your love and compassion for others. And it's not something for you to feel bad about. It's something that's being done to you or for you so that you'll have even greater abilities and capacities than what you have.
Linguist said, yes, all capitals. And Fantasy Animal Vegan said, I needed to hear this so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good too, knowing that I could at least impact somebody.
Yeah.
Positively.
I think that's something, I think that's part of the thing that needs to be unlocked for us as human beings sometimes, is this idea that, like, individualism, not a bad thing, but the idea that everyone is here with a purpose. Mm-hmm. Everyone is here and has a purpose. And if you understand that everybody has a purpose, then you also realize that this message of loving each other takes on a much serious tone.
Yes.
Because then you have to accept that person is here for a reason, and you can't be dismissive of that person. Right? Mm-hmm. At least that's the way that I've kind of been viewing it. So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or we talk about ascending to the next level and going up in densities and all these things, I think that's kind of like the first thing that we might need to learn, is the fact that we have to be accepting, that we have to be loving. And sometimes that can be, and I'll be the first to admit, sometimes that can be very difficult to do.
That's true. And
Don't
that
get big eyes at me. I can see you. There's a camera here.
Well,
I wasn't going to say anything.
But it is another reason why I really feel like living what you believe and understand to be true is important. Yeah. Because it's so easy to sit back on the sidelines and not do these things, not get involved, not get your hands messy, not get caught up in struggles of other people. But from a spiritual sense, it's positive growth for you. Having moral courage to support someone who's going through hard times and to stick up for them and stand up and say, no, what's being done to this person is wrong. That's an advanced spiritual trait, but it indicates a purity of heart and a purity of spirit too, that you have to have before you're capable of doing something like that. but it's important to live it. And the only way you can get that is to experience it and to struggle with it and fail and fail and fail until you finally succeed.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, that's my high horse.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people appreciated your high horse because they thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. And it's connected, I think, a lot to those things that we've been talking about, that things are changing, that things are going to be moving. And I think more and more we're seeing from different parts of life, people kind of repeating this message from different bullhorns, you know. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, something to think about.
Yeah. Well, now's probably the time where the more advanced spirits are on the planet. People who, you know, and the people are experimenting with different spiritual abilities that they have and learning these abilities now that they'll experience later on, either in other incarnations or in other realities and stuff. You're getting a taste of it now, so that you'll have a better idea of how it works and how to manipulate it later on.
That's another message that keeps coming up over and over again for people that I read for, is that now is the time that they need to remember what they came here to do, because
Right.
they already have some higher skill set that they came here to implement. And now is like it is the time that we need to be using those so that we can get to that 51%, and all us little piddly electrons can hope over to the next realm, you know?
Right. Well, and also too, this may be one of the elephants in the room, is if you've got something to say or proclaim or talk about or whatever, you know you're going to come up against resistance from people who don't believe it. And a lot of people are afraid to take that first step.
Yep.
So it's important that you do take that first step and don't think about what other people think. And I know it's a hard road to go through, and I'm guilty of doing the same thing too, you know, because I haven't gotten out and talked about the stuff I'm talking to you about, you know, with as many other people. But it needs to be done. And if you wanted to say that could be one of your greater purposes, and also too, your lifetime spiritual test is to go out and proclaim these things and meet that resistance and struggle with it. And that's what's going to, it's like going to the gym, you know, and working out with weights, and that resistance makes you stronger. Do these things and don't sit on the sidelines, because you won't get stronger. But if you do them and you have those experiences and you struggle and fail, you'll eventually struggle and succeed. But it's a growth for you. And at this level, you don't have simple lessons. You're going to have more complex lessons to learn. And, you know, you can think of other prophets in history who went through struggles, you know, tortures and painful things and stuff like that. That could even have been their spiritual test. But, you know, you could have something similar. I've known a couple people that I've met who they were really at the bottom rung of their money and everything. There was one person that I met, and they were living in a 2-room tent in a trailer park, and with a queen size mattress in one of those 2 rooms and 2 cats. And they could barely afford to pay the trailer park for the tent that they were in, you know. And you can go down that far. They're doing great now, but at the time, you know, they questioned, you know, what was going on and whether they should have done what they did. But if you know that it's a spiritual test, that you'll be rewarded if you're successful, that can give you the strength to carry on. And I just happened to walk into their life and helped them out to, you know, with some things. But they had a group of people helping them. But this will happen. And if you just feel confident that or believe that it will, it will.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Because thoughts are things.
Thoughts are things. There you go. And if you believe it, it'll happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a lot of hearts in the chat there, Mark.
Yeah, lots of hearts. Lots of hearts.
Well,
lots of conversation going on.
yeah, it tells me it's something that people need to talk about, or that we all need to get out in the open more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I still struggle with. I'm a lot more open about what I do, but I'm still not completely open about all the things I do, because some of them are just so bizarre that it's hard for me to share it with certain people, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I understand it.
But now's the time.
Now's the time. But also, too, there's people coming into existence who have these abilities innately, and they don't know what they are or how to use them. Yeah. So for the people that are here that already have an idea of how to use them, how you manifest them, what you do with them once you have, that's the important thing about teaching. But if people don't know that you can be their teacher, they miss out. So it's important to, at least at a high level, say these things are possible. You don't have to go and start a business and try to make money, but, communicate the skills that you have so that people, through the word of mouth and the networks and stuff, can bring people to you when they're ready to have a teacher or a mentor to help them out.
Yeah, very, very true. Yep. Linguist is talking about a leap of faith. Yes. Leap of faith.
All right. So we've made it 3/4 of the way through. So kind of reset it a little bit. For anyone who's jumped in the chat since we've gotten started, we have Mark Hunter Brooks on tonight. We're talking about all kinds of serious things. I don't even know if we can put a title on this one because we've talked about just about all of it, but that's a good thing. So if you have any questions for Mark, go ahead and put them in chat. If you want to, you can use the channel points down there, the Element 115, to highlight your message to make sure we don't miss it. Get it in there, and we will start relaying some of those questions as we go along. But I wanted to check with you, Jenny, because I know you had said earlier today that you had some stuff that you still wanted to talk about. I don't know if you have gotten there yet or not.
So this is my experience. So when I was reading your book, I stuck a Post-it note in it so I could find it today. The densities, the dimensions, and having these higher and less densities.
Right.
It makes total sense that our physical bodies would be really dense and that the other things would be less dense. That just makes sense. Okay. But my experience is that it might be the opposite. And let me tell you why it's my experience. So, having an experience multiple times with like higher dimensional beings who are coming into my physical space and blending with my energy.
Right.
I have had the experience of my physical body feeling extraordinarily dense. Right. When they are part of my self. And in one of the channeled books, which is the Raw Contact, that channeled information talks about there being a thing as spiritual mass. That there's this whole other mass that we're not even aware of because it's not the same as our physical mass. It's this other thing that creates a deeper density. So that was the thing that I've been wanting to talk to you about ever since I read your book. I don't know how long ago now, because I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Well, let me ask you a question. Could it be the consciousness of that non-physical entity merging with your physical body
that makes it feel more dense?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very possible.
I don't know because I don't channel.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I do.
But it helps to talk about it. It really does, because it helps validate things that you think may be true, or disprove things that in your own mind what you think.
Yeah.
But that's what I would say is that the mechanics of channeling for me would be that this higher dimensional being would come into your body and actually kind of take up residence to a certain extent, so that they could see through your eyes and use your speech, your voice box in your mouth to talk.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd use your eyes or not, but that's what I would think that they would do. Also, too, I think channeling is for beings that are beyond the astral, and I would want to say if they're in the astral, they'll use telepathy, which would be your mediumship skills. But that for you to be able to communicate with them, that indicates a certain purity of your own spirit as well, to get beings that are in those mental dimensions or even in the causal dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah. It just made me feel like there's more. Of course, there's always more, but there's like more to it than we realize. And that the physicalness of our bodies in this dimension is, I just don't know how to explain it. Like that we think that this physical body is this dense thing because to us it's a physical heavy thing.
Right.
But perhaps there's another whole nother level and layer to what we think of as density when it comes to spirit. I don't know. Just it's something that's been swirling around in my brain.
It's good to have the discussion. But also, too, just think, when I talked about the rapture, too, is the thought that your physical body can dematerialize. If it happens that way, or if it's just your consciousness that goes, if it happens the other way, too. So that there's a vibrational change that would move you from one reality potentially to another.
And it really, we've just brought the conversation all the way full circle, or full Taurus, if we want to say, because we brought it right back around to the vibrations and the frequency. And that's really probably it's the fabric of everything,
Right.
This frequency and vibration. Because even colors have frequency and vibration. It's like everything is made up of this vibration.
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking of recently, and I don't have a Taurus around here, but if you could imagine, the circle of the Taurus like a donut shape, but you have individual lines or individual tubes for each of the Taurus arms or whatever going around, is you could think of reincarnation as being travel around that Taurus. Is for each loop you do, that's a different lifetime. So as you go around and around the Taurus loops, from one loop to another loop to another loop, that could be a different lifetime. And when you're ready to go, you ascend through the middle.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right. It may be wrong, but that's kind of where my brain's been in the last couple of months. You can imagine.
Brings up the tunnel thing, though. It's like the middle of that Taurus is like a tunnel.
That's something to contemplate as well.
What's your thought? This is going to bring up a whole nother can of worms that we probably don't have time for. But what's your thoughts on the idea that all time is happening at the same time?
Oh, I agree with that. Is that the Earth experience to me is a timeline. It may be a waveform timeline. If you wanted to say even be the waves around its own torus. But think of it as a sine wave, because if you have people that are sitting at a certain point on that sine wave who expand their consciousness, they can touch another loop or the previous loop or the next loop to have premonitions and deja vu and all these other things. That's one way to explain that. But you need to have that entire timeline available to spirits that need to incarnate, at 400 BC, 500 AD, 1200 AD, 1500, 1800s, 1900s, and 2000s, in order to have different levels of experiences as their consciousness develops. So I could see that as being true, that time really is everything's happening all at the same time.
Yeah.
which I don't know if we've talked about this with you, Mark, specifically, but that brings up a lot of interesting things that we've talked about before, like the possibility of future life regressions or future life progressions. I don't know.
Yeah. And you have to have a certain level of consciousness development. I think it's in the upper mental, if you're familiar with the different levels, that you get the ability to see different future events as part of the Akashic records. In the lower mental, you can only see past events, but the future events are all percentage based, or probabilities of whichever path or choice you make depends on which way you go or the probability of something happening. So anyway, but I don't know.
So could premonitions be a memory of a future life? Like that could be one way to explain them. Like someone who has a dream that knows that something's going to happen, someone who considers themselves a prophet, like that information might not be them gleaming into the future, but instead then remembering something that happened in the future.
You never know. I don't know because I could see you explain it with remote viewing, because you can remote view forward and backward in time as well as across different distances.
If it's all happening at the same time.
Yeah. But you have to have a certain level of spiritual purity to be able to do that. And another thing I'll just toss out in terms of people, talk about free will versus determinism and stuff. And when you have religious conversations, I like to say that it's not one or the other, it's both, is that you have a certain number of events that are already predetermined that you'll go through and experience, because it's part of why you're here on earth, is to have these experiences. But where you have free will is in how you choose to respond to each one of those events. So, you can't really control whether something happens to you positively or negatively, but you have total control over how you choose to respond. And that's the whole test for you and your lifetime here on earth. It's going back to this thing with Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, can you still respond to an event that may be detrimental to you with love and compassion for the people or person that did that to you or did something to you? So anyway, I hope that helped.
Well, people are blowing up the chat here. I don't even know where to go. But Linguist would like for us to read this because she highlighted it. So she's been watching these videos of a person who channels somebody named Bashar.
Yes.
So she was watching one of those today, and she said, all lives happen at the same time. They just happen at a different frequency, and that's why we perceive only one at a time. But past and future lives are interconnected and affect each other based on the choices we make and the similarity of situations we go through parallel.
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
Linguist, what are you doing reading that stuff?
She's always on it reading something.
She's always into that stuff. She's the one I worry about asking a question that I'll sit here and look like a fool on video,
Yeah, somebody said
Linguist, you ask good questions. I'm not trying to detract about that. But boy,
somebody said we need to have her on as a guest as a 24-hour stream.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
So I think we have another question here from Ducks Explorer Tony. Does time even exist, or are there just different dimensions and different orientations? I think the concept of time is just a way for us to fool our minds.
You could use time as to track the motion of different objects. It's a way of measuring. But I think I've used this example before in a previous appearance. It was a geometric example or analogy. Is imagine you have a cube, a square, a line, and a point floating in front of you, and that you can turn that wire cube to look like a square. You can turn the square sideways to look like a line. You can turn the line down to look like a point. But a point can't look like a line can't look like a square, and a square can't look like a cube. So you've got that. So you can go down dimensions, but not up dimensions. And another analogy would be motion picture is you could stop a motion picture to where a single frame would look like a photograph, but a photograph can't look like a motion picture or can't move like a motion picture. But, and then here's where time comes in, is say like you take this square and it's a picture and you stack up, different iterations of those pictures to where one's moving just a little bit more each time, then fan it like a fan book. And you can have like the moving horse fan book that you may have seen.
Yeah.
But you can take a lower dimensional object, which would be a square, and manipulate it to where if you go through time, that you can give that appearance of motion, which would be a higher dimension thing to happen. Like that photograph, a stack of photographs can look like a motion picture when you play it through time. So that's one thing for it. There's a lady I know, Candace Sanderson. She is a book author, and she wrote a book called The Reluctant Messenger. And in one of the chapters, she talks about time and the expansion of consciousness and how it can pick up different things, deja vu in the past or premonitions in the future. And she had gotten that through spiritual conversations. And that's one credible explanation that I thought, for time that she did. So Candace Sanderson, The Reluctant Messenger.
The other thing that I would have to tack onto that, trying to figure out if time is a real scientific thing and not just a figment of our imagination, is the idea that, like the idea of space-time, and we know that time is altered depending on how strong the gravitational force is of something. So, time is moving slower on Earth than it is in the orbit around Earth, or time moves much slower when you're going around a black hole than as if you're further away from the gravity source of the black hole.
Right.
Wouldn't that kind of, I'm afraid I'm going to cook my brain like an egg trying to think about this right now, but I mean, to a certain extent, is that proof of time because it alters?
I would still say it's a measurement, not necessarily a dimension. And this may not be fair with my response, but I was going to say, I think there's really 5 spatial dimensions, not 3. So when you talk about 4 dimensions, with the 4th one being time, I just say there's 5 spatial dimensions. And I think there was one academic, Minkoff, who proposed 5 dimensions. I know with string theory, there's 11, or superstring theory is 13, but you can have multiple. But this whole idea of a 4th dimension, I say that's the first looping dimension, and I may have mentioned this before, is an explanation for the existence of infinity in our reality. Is that, science says that infinity can't exist in nature, but if you say that infinity is actually a 4th dimensional structure, to where you have the whole number infinity going out to infinity and the fractional infinity going to 0, that they loop in the 4th dimension. And you have a tesseract, which is like this moving square within a square that loops on each other. That's a torus. And so you can say that toruses are 4th dimensional objects, but you could have infinity looping in the 4th dimension, which would be part of the 3 dimensions we have here. And that 4th dimension I call the dimension of scale, because we have an existence here at this level, but you also have subatomic particles, you have microscopic, animals, flora and fauna, you have planets, you have galaxies and universes, all at different levels. And I just talked about Itzhak Bentov and occult chemistry, showing you how at the universe level you could have those loops, but black holes would be part of that loop as well. And I think I mentioned before that there's white holes that were theorized as being the opposite of black holes. Is where all the matter gets sucked into a black hole, you have a white hole that spits it out. And when you're talking about superclusters, you have voids as well as black holes, voids in space where the matter could come out. But I think I mentioned in my book that my thought on that white hole is that that's the Big Bang, is that's the emergence of matter from a black hole through a white hole into our existence. And then if you look at Bentov's, grain of rice, it's really an egg-shaped loop with a white hole, black hole in the middle. And so we're going through, this loop like a torus in a way, just like the Anu is a torus in a way. Everything's a torus, a hierarchy of tori.
Makes me think of the yin yang as well.
Yin yang. So that's my explanation for the fourth dimension, and then the fifth dimension would be these non-physical dimensions around each planet: the etheric, astral, lower, higher mental, lower and upper causal, and then the formless, and that they're around each individual planet. But then you have other dimensions that are for the solar system and for the galaxies and even on up higher. So you have that as well, but that could also be related to scale. So Frosty, when you talk about time being a dimension or potentially being a dimension, I see 5 spatial before I get into time as a thing, and that's kind of a block with me. Maybe I've learned too much or whatever. I feel for people who take advanced degrees, because while you're learning a lot of new information and stuff, you're being trained to think a certain way.
Yes.
And so it's a positive thing as well as a negative thing. But people have to realize.
That was explained very well. Yeah, that was explained very well, because I try to talk about that because, I'm a trained historian, and sometimes that's wonderful. It's a skill set that is great, but at the same time, it can oftentimes be a little, blocking sometimes to other things that I try to do,
Right.
So yeah, for sure. Well,
this talk about future lives, it's really blown everybody's brains, because I think
we have a lot of questions here. So I'll open this question up from Tara Tarot for either of you or both of you. I'm a tarot reader. I've never read a future life. Is that even possible? If so, how would you accomplish that? Maybe either one of you, or feel free if do you have anything for that, Jenny?
I mean, I can talk from my experience that I have read people's future lives, and you just have to think of, you can't think about it as something that hasn't happened yet, because if all time is happening at the same time, then it's all there. It's all there. But I think that Journey of Self-Discovery said something important just now, that really all there is the present moment. Yeah. But what do you think about that, Mark? The future life?
I was sitting there trying to break down the tarot stuff and again compare it with remote viewing.
Yeah.
So remote viewing is more of a sensation type thing, whereas tarot. Yeah, I guess tarot would be sensation. I was thinking mediumship is more communication. So you can do it multiple ways, but I would think you could go forward and talk to other entities in time, forward in time as well as backward in time as well. My question would be are you talking to the same consciousness in those future entities? Because the same person can have multiple consciousnesses living that person's life, that, at different times, if you want to say. It isn't like there's only one timeline of time, is that can explode out as well. And like my lifetime, your lifetime, Frosty's lifetime, we could each switch and exchange stuff just so that we could have the experiences that we each are having right now. If you think of time as everything happening all at the same time, you can have multiple incarnations of yourself. And I've said this before, in the same time stream. So you could have yourself as your parent and as your child, who's helping you along. It'd just be a different incarnation of that, of yourself. So when you start thinking waves and in terms of all that, things get a lot more complex, but I think it's a lot closer to reality. And what people think as being woo-woo or the paranormal is really our real reality. We just don't know it yet because we haven't developed the consciousness to the point where we could understand it or comprehend it. Yeah. And I think people are reaching that point right now.
Well, if you thought your brain hurt previously, Linguist has highlighted another comment. She said, "Oh, and here's something that I was just rereading about black holes. Ross said that a black hole is a physical manifestation of infinity within this universe uniting with the source, and through that gravity, the light gets sucked into the black hole and basically transitions into another octave universe," which is pretty much what you were saying, that it's going into the black hole to come out the other side as something new. Yeah.
And who's to say that you wouldn't come out in a different universe as well? We don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, it can happen. It sounds right.
There we go. And then CMC was kind of building off what Linguist said there. That raises a question. Are we experiencing black hole energy transitioning into our octave?
I think we're in an octave that came out of a white hole that we still have to go around through the development process. Because if you think we're just now individualizing our spirit, if you eventually want to think that we could be a planetary spirit or a consciousness for a star or a consciousness for a galaxy, we have a long way to go. So we're just now starting. But if you think also too of orders of magnitude of scale, we could have been a paramecium, a one-celled animal, all the way up, through rocks and minerals to single-celled animals to single-celled plants to multi-cell tissue, whatever, going right up the ladder. It's not something that you could accomplish in a couple iterations. It could take hundreds or thousands of reincarnations to get to the point where we are. And who's to say there wouldn't be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of incarnations before we get up to a higher point? I think that once we individualize our spirit, though, things go much faster. And I think in higher dimensions, time goes much faster too. And I did, what is it, that physics formula on page 52 of my book, The Standing Wave Vibration on a String. And there's some variables, two variables, I think, are what manipulate your dimension. And that's tension. It's the square root of tension over linear density. But I want to say that tension term is time. And the important thing is to keep that ratio the same, but you would either raise it or shrink it to go from one dimension to another, according to that formula. Now, that's just me. That I have nothing to back it up or whatever, but there's a formula that you can use to do an explanation for not only dimensions, but realities as well, because different realities could be at the different harmonics in that formula, just like the different dimensions could be at that ratio. And that ratio explains how you could have the same frequency range in different dimensions. Is because that ratio is different, but it's still going to allow you to have the full frequency range. You say, just like our hearing is 20 hertz, 20,000 hertz, you'd still be able to use that in the astral or the mental as well. If you have that ratio is what differentiates you from one dimension to another.
You guys get all that?
There we go.
Just me thinking. I don't know if it's right or not, but it's just an idea for discussion.
I think it makes
it's wonderful.
So much of it that makes sense.
Yeah. And like I said, you get into the time stuff, and that's where I start feeling my brain heat up, and I hear crackling and popping, and
brains hurts afterwards. Yeah.
I feel like the old commercial. This is your brain. This is your brain
trying to
Mark
think about
Hunter
time.
Brooks. Yeah, this is your brain with Mark Hunter Brooks on the witching hours. Yeah,
that's what people do. They come to the witching hours so they can take Advil and go to
bed. All right. Well, we are 3 minutes past the hour. We've hit the old 10 o'clock on the East Coast, and I guess we'll start winding down from here. For everyone who's listening on the podcast, we appreciate you checking us out on the podcast and over on YouTube. If you made it this far in the video, please go ahead and hit that. You've been hanging out for over 2 hours watching us. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like button and leave us a comment down below. Thanks so much for coming on again, Mark. We appreciate you being on here again.
I enjoy it very much. I enjoy talking to you as well as your whole community. I love the the interactions that you have.
Yeah, CMC already wants to know when you're coming back.
Whenever you'll have me.
As linguist, I had another question already.
Yeah, save it. We'll copy it down somewhere and we'll hit it next time. So for everybody in Twitch, we'll hang out for another second. For all of you listening at another place and another time, we will see you all next time.